True relief from modern stressors detected. Containment necessary. By NoSleep Scribe. Welcome, listeners. The stresses and pressures of modern life don't always arrive as crises. Sometimes they arrive as exhaustion, as the quiet belief that if you just sat down for a moment, nothing would fall apart. Tonight's story isn't about violence. It isn't about monsters in the dark or something that hunts you. It's about an anomaly that doesn't chase, it waits. When an entire town stops leaving, not because they're trapped, but because they no longer want to, the Department of Anomaly Analysis and Administration is deployed to investigate. What they find isn't a threat, it's relief. And once you recognize what's been taken from you, refusal becomes unnecessary. And if you feel the urge to slow down while listening, that's not an accident. Take care of yourself. You don't have to rush. You do need to like and subscribe, though. This story contains themes of psychological influence, emotional fatigue, institutional compliance, and voluntary loss of agency. It explores concepts of burnout, withdrawal from responsibility, and the seductive nature of rest when life becomes overwhelming. There is no graphic violence, but the narrative may be unsettling for listeners sensitive to themes of manipulation, disassociation, or existential helplessness. Listener discretion is advised. True relief from modern stressors detected. Containment necessary. By NoSleep Scribe. Chapter 1. Initial Containment. If you're reading this, then I didn't follow extraction protocol. This isn't a confession, it's a fact. I'm stating it up front so no one wastes time pretending this was an accident or that I got blindsided or that I was careless. I knew what I was walking into. I just didn't understand what it would feel like once I was inside. My name is Eli Stone, and I am an operative with the Department of Anomaly Analysis and Administration. I've spent the last 18 years maintaining readiness and deploying wherever necessary to deal with anomaly incidents. This incident didn't begin with barricades or gunfire or screaming phone calls. It began with refusals. Auto repossession drivers were the first anomaly cluster. 3 independent contractors entered the town over 5 days to recover vehicles flagged for default. All 3 crossed the municipal boundary. None of them returned. Their trucks were found later, parked legally, keys on the dash, engines cold, no blood, no dragged footprints, no struggle. When we called them, they answered. They sounded calm, polite, unconcerned, and they declined to leave. Law enforcement followed. 2 patrol cars, 1 supervisor, body cams active. They performed a welfare check at a residence one of the missing drivers had listed as his new one. They made contact, no distress indicators. At minute 12, one officer asked if he could sit down. At minute 14, both officers disengaged from the call. At minute 17, they radioed in that the situation was stable and required no further resources. They remained in town. This pattern repeated with a utility worker, a county assessor, and a private ambulance crew responding to a routine transport request. No one panicked. No one asked for help. Everyone simply stayed. That's when my unit was activated. We specialize in anomalies that don't announce themselves. Mimetic hazards, behavioral traps, environmental effects that present as choice, the kind of threat that doesn't chase you, it waits to be invited. Satellite imagery showed no damage, power grids intact, water usage elevated but stable, food deliveries increased by 300% over baseline, mostly bulk staples and ready-to-eat meals. Outbound traffic decreased. Reported stress-related incidents dropped. Cellular data showed devices clustered indoors, stationary but active. No outgoing emergency calls, no social media spikes in panic or distress. The town didn't collapse, it settled. Regular Army units established a perimeter under a hazardous materials cover story. Chemical spill, unstable ground, the usual. Personnel rotation was set to 6-hour shifts, with mandatory psychological screening on exit. Even then, we lost 2. One soldier delayed extraction by 8 minutes because he wanted to finish a conversation. The other asked permission to take her helmet off and sit on the curb. Neither resisted removal. Both requested reassignment back inside the perimeter within 48 hours. Both requests were denied. Then I was inserted as lead investigator. Full protocol, timed exposure, cognitive anchors, biometric telemetry feeding directly to command. My orders were simple. Observe, document, identify the anomaly, withdraw. Neutralize only if escalation occurred. I crossed the boundary at 9:02. The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the absence of sound. There were birds, wind in the trees, the distant hum of appliances, but the absence of urgency. Nothing competed for attention. No overlapping noises, no mechanical impatience. The town looked cared for. Lawns trimmed, streets cleaned, cars parked like someone had taken time to choose the spot. Curtains drawn against the sun, like someone protecting a sleeper. I walked 3 blocks before I saw a civilian. Middle-aged male, casual clothes, no visible stress markers. He acknowledged me with a nod, then went back to eating from a disposable bowl balanced comfortably on his knee. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't warn me away. And that was when my training started to feel loud. My headset chimed, command requesting a status update. I opened my mouth to respond, and for just a moment, brief, almost negligible, I had the thought that the update could wait, that there was no hurry, that nothing bad would happen if I took my time. I reported in anyway, but I slowed my pace, just a little. Chapter 2, Preliminary Assessment. I told myself the first contact would be clinical. In and out, minimum exposure, keep it clean. But the moment I stepped onto that man's porch, the world felt like it had softened at the edges. Not blurred, not distorted, just less sharp. He opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd been expecting me. "You must be tired," he said. "I'm here to ask you some questions." "Of course. Come in. You don't need to stand." I hesitated. "I'll remain standing." "That's all right, too." The house was warm, clean, and arranged like it had been designed for one purpose: comfort. The lights weren't dim and they weren't bright. They were diffused, soft enough to calm your eyes without making you feel sleepy. The furniture didn't block movement. It simply suggested sitting was the natural outcome of entering the room. A television was on, voice low. not loud enough to pull attention, just present enough to fill the silence if you wanted it to. I asked him when he first started noticing changes. When did people start staying? I said. Staying? Refusing to leave. Oh. He sounded genuinely confused by my framing. That wasn't sudden. Then what? He looked at me like I'd asked something simple. When being here made everything stop hurting. I waited for the punchline that never came. Were you experiencing stress prior to the onset? I asked. Everyone is. More than usual? I don't think so. He shifted his bowl slightly, like he was making room in his hands for the idea. I think I just noticed it more. Noticed what? How much effort everything took, he said. How little I got to relax and enjoy life. He offered me food, not aggressively, not insistently, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I declined, and I hated how much effort that took. You need food, he said. You keep pushing yourself past safe boundaries, and you don't even give your body the fuel it requires. I can see it in the way you hold yourself. I'm on duty. I know. Then you understand why you can be on duty and still eat. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened, not from fear, but from something closer to being seen. I forced myself back into mission parameters. I asked him who or what made him realize he needed to slow down. His mouth curved into a small smile. Not the smile of someone holding a secret. The smile of someone recognizing something familiar. The caretaker showed me, he said. Who is the caretaker? His eyebrows lifted slightly. Have you heard her already? I didn't say. It's all right, he said gently. Everyone does. Is she a person? No. A broadcast? Sometimes. Then what is she? He didn't even pause. Relief. There was no moment of onset, he told me. No flashpoint, no inciting incident, no infection curve. There was a release. The day it stopped feeling like I was behind, he said. I asked what happened to people who tried to leave. He blinked like the question didn't translate. Then his face shifted, not into concern for himself, concern for me. Why would they want to? He asked. Because they have lives outside this town. So do we. Jobs, families, responsibilities. We still have those. Then why aren't they leaving? He said it simply, like stating gravity. Because nothing bad happens when you stay. That's when I noticed something was happening inside my own body. Time didn't feel slowed. It didn't feel accelerated. It felt wide, unpressured, like the day had room for me. I left the house without resistance. He didn't block the door. He didn't follow. But as I stepped off the porch, he spoke again, quietly, like he didn't need me to answer. You can stay as long as you need. I'm not here to stay. Of course not. Then why say that? Because it's true anyway. Chapter 3, Temporal Drift. I intended to log at regular intervals. That plan didn't fail. It dissolved. There was no moment when time slipped away. No gap I can point to and say, there. Instead, the day widened. Tasks took the space they needed. Nothing pressed against the edges. I should be able to quantify this. That's what my training demands. But report language assumes urgency is constant. Inside the perimeter, urgency wasn't operative. I felt well. Command requested an update at 1410 hours. I acknowledged receipt at 1442 hours. At the time, it didn't feel like a delay. I was finishing a conversation. I couldn't even tell you how it started. A woman on a public bench, posture arranged for comfort rather than alertness, food beside her. When I passed, she looked up like she'd known I would. You don't need to apologize for pausing, she said. I wasn't apologizing. I know. She offered me food, and this time I accepted. It didn't interfere with my duties. If anything, after eating, my hands steadied. My breathing slowed into something more efficient. I hadn't felt this physically regulated in years. I tried to reconstruct a precise timeline of events since entry. I abandoned the attempt, not because I was confused, because it felt redundant. The order didn't matter here. Outcomes were consistent, regardless of sequence. People sat, people ate, people spoke when they had something worth saying. Silence didn't demand explanation. I walked the interior perimeter again. Houses occupied. Lights turned on gradually as the sun lowered. Not because the schedule said so, but because someone felt like it. Residents nodded at me. One waved. None asked if I was leaving. At some point, I realized I had stopped checking my watch. That should have alarmed me. Instead, it felt efficient. Sleep came easily, uninterrupted, no dreams. I woke without the familiar internal inventory of obligations. I didn't wake and immediately start tallying what I owed the day. The absence was almost frightening until it became pleasant. Command requested I initiate a cognitive anchor at 1800 hours. I acknowledged. I didn't do it. Not out of defiance. The anchor is designed to reintroduce urgency and self-surveillance. Neither felt necessary for operational awareness. I remained capable. I remained informed. I was simply not strained. Time didn't behave differently here. Not faster, not slower. Just kinder. Chapter 4. Refusal. Command issued an extraction directive. I acknowledged it, and I declined. That's what everyone will want to call insubordination, because it's easier than admitting the truth. This wasn't rebellion, it was assessment. The directive assumed urgency was the primary risk factor, but urgency didn't exist inside the perimeter. I was oriented. I was capable. My judgment was intact. I felt better than I did when I arrived. That mattered. Command demanded my reason. State your reason for refusal. Extraction introduces unnecessary stress. Stress is preferable to compromise. Compromise has not occurred. You are not authorized to determine that. With respect, I said and meant it. Determining that is my role. Refusal protocols typically result in immediate sedation and forced extraction. My refusal isn't coercion or misconduct, I said. It's logic and my own well-being. There was a pause, and then something entered the channel that wasn't command. Not loud, not aggressive, not even fully there. More like a voice sliding between frequencies, gentle enough that my mind didn't flinch from it. You don't have to rush. You're safe to finish your thought. You're safest when you're rested. I should have felt violated. I didn't. The content wasn't directive. It didn't contradict mission parameters. If anything, it supported completion. I walked to the extraction LZ to evaluate readiness. The helicopter was there, engines idling, crew waiting. The pilot looked tired, not sleepy, tired in the way people get when they've been bracing for too long. Jaw tight, shoulders locked, breath shallow, like it had forgotten how to be deep. "Sir," the pilot said, "we're on a clock. There's no threat. Command wants you out. Command wants the situation stabilized. That means leaving. Not if leaving destabilizes the asset." He stared at me. Then, like his body had been waiting for permission, 10 minutes. While I stood there, the voice returned. This time it wasn't in the air. It was inside my own recorder. I hadn't activated any receiving equipment. "You're doing fine. It's all right to stop here. We'll hold things steady. Let the weight go." I want to be explicit. I wasn't being compelled. No force applied. No command was overridden. I was simply declining to leave a stable environment in favor of a destabilizing one. It aligned with risk mitigation doctrine. When command finally responded, the message was delayed. "Acknowledged. Status. Extraction deferred pending review. Action. Maintain position. Continue reporting." Relief washed through me. Not emotional relief. Physiological. Muscles released. Breath deepened. The town stayed quiet. Lights came on. Somewhere nearby, someone laughed softly, without urgency. And then, one last time, the voice bled through at the edge of hearing. "You can stay. You've done enough for today. You matter too." I remained available for further instruction. There was no need to hurry. Chapter 5. Dissemination. The posture changed. Not announced, not voted on, not signed. It arrived the way institutional shifts always do, through language first. Someone rewrote maximum exposure duration into recommended observation window. Someone replaced cognitive anchor enforcement with operator discretion. Some removed any phrasing that implied urgency where no escalation was present. The word containment disappeared. The town became a stabilization site. No one objected. That wasn't consensus, but it was how consensus forms. I stayed inside the perimeter. Others joined me. A second officer declined extraction. There was no standoff, no raised voices. They cited fatigue. They cited clarity. They cited me. Command reviewed the data, and then quietly, almost naturally, Command agreed. Someone asked, "Are we concerned about precedent?" And someone else answered, only if it causes harm. Does it? Not that we can measure. Then why does this feel wrong? Habit. The broadcasts stopped being treated as incursions. They were logged as ambient signal phenomena. They appeared in transcripts without comment. You're allowed to stop pushing. Nothing important is being lost. We'll take care of the rest. I was asked to prepare a briefing, internal training, contextual orientation for future deployments. I complied. I wrote a module that said, operators may experience reduced urgency, increased calm, and a desire to remain stationary. These effects are not inherently dangerous. Resistance is not required. Observation benefits from stillness. At the end, I included a supplemental resource. I labeled it optional. Orientation audio, low bandwidth stream, environmental acclimation aid, voluntary listening only. It contained the message, not the whole of it, just enough. Enough to explain, enough to let someone decide. I watched the metrics afterwards. Listening time was high. Completion rates were near total. No one reported adverse effects. Several requested reassignment. I felt better than I had in years. Not euphoric, just absence. The absence of a constant internal pressure I'd mistaken for readiness. I was still capable of action. I just no longer confused motion with necessity. And in the module footer, where no one would have to see it unless they scrolled, the voice was waiting. If you're listening to this now, it means you stayed. That's all right. You don't have to do anything next. Motion is not morality. Industriousness is not virtue. The town remained stable. The perimeter remained intact. The message was contained, for now. Chapter 6, Exit Interview. They called it a voluntary separation interview. They made sure the word disciplinary never touched the paperwork. This isn't disciplinary, the interviewer said. I know. You understand you're declining reassignment? Yes. And you understand that staying here ends your field status? It ends my rotation. Words matter. They do. They asked for a reason for the record. I gave them the only one I'd already given. There is no harm to mitigate here. That's a conclusion. It's an observation. They asked about the broadcasts. Non-coercive. The training module. Accurate. The supplemental file. Optional. There was a long pause. Then the interviewer leaned forward slightly, and the voice dropped out of procedure. Off the record, are you compromised? No. Then why does it sound like you're finished? Because I am. What happens to you if you stay? I continue living. That's not an answer. It's the most accurate one I have. Under the recording, at sub-audible levels, the signal drifted in like a hand on the back of your neck. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. It's all right to stop now. The interviewer blinked. Was that? Yes. We're not logging that. You already did. They asked one final question. If we're wrong, if this spreads beyond containment, what do you think happens? I didn't hesitate. I think people sit down and discover nothing collapses. You're certain. I met their eyes and told the truth. I'm rested. They accepted my separation. They suspended my credentials without revocation. They permitted me to remain inside the exclusion zone as a civilian resident. No non-disclosure enforcement requested. Amicable. No further action required. Recording break. If you're still listening, this part isn't for them. They need procedure, language, clean edges. You don't. You stayed through the slow parts, the quiet parts, the parts where nothing went wrong. If your shoulders dropped while you were listening, that wasn't an accident. That's how this works. I was trained to recognize threats by their urgency, by the way they force decisions, by how loudly they insist. The caretaker never did that. She waited. She let me notice how much effort I was carrying and how unnecessary it was. I joined the town, not because I had to, because I didn't want to keep bleeding momentum for systems that only recognize motion. This is a message. You've heard pieces of it already. If you found this recording, you know where the file was stored. I archived it as a training supplement because that's what it is. Orientation, not instruction. If you want to listen, really listen, the access path is simple. I placed it where it won't demand anything from you. You don't have to click it. You don't have to share it. You don't have to decide today. Just know it's there. And if you do listen and your town feels quieter afterward, if sitting down feels suddenly reasonable, that doesn't mean something is wrong. It means you were tired. We'll take care of the rest. You've done enough. Epilogue, archival status. The department filed it under wellness. That's what they wrote on the label. That's what they told themselves it was. A stabilizing anomaly. Non-hostile. Consensual. Contained. But they kept the perimeter anyway. Not because the caretaker was harmful. Because what she offered was irrefusable. Given enough exposure, refusal becomes unnecessary, not through coercion, but through recognition. And the department understood something they would never say out loud. If the caretaker spread beyond containment, it wouldn't look like an apocalypse. It would look like people sitting down, relaxing, recharging, and realizing the world didn't end. Only the systems that depended on their exhaustion.